This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know. This is a story that the Karliner Rebbe would tell every Sukkot. In a small town, there was a Karliner Chassid who was very poor. He didn't have anything, barely had a home, but every year, when Sukkot came, it was mamish his holiday. He would build himself a little sukkah out on the road, and with his whole family, they would be celebrating, singing, dancing, playing instruments, all Sukkot. It was just a fantastic holiday for him, a relief from all of his suffering. But across the street was a very wealthy Jew who owned the main factory in town that hired just about everyone in town, and he hated this Karliner Chassid. He hated that the family was so happy because he himself was so miserable. Even though he had everything, his family was always shouting at one another, and the wife and kids didn't respect one another, and they didn't respect their father, and everyone was miserable, and no one was happy. And when somebody is miserable, they can't stand somebody who's happy. So this Karliner Chassid, who was across the road from the wealthy man, was really ruining his chag with all of this joy, because he wasn't letting him be miserable. How can he be miserable when someone across the street is so happy? And so one year, the wealthy man decided he's going to make sure this Karliner Chassid doesn't have a sukkah. Because, it costs money to build a sukkah. You have to buy the wood and nails, buy the schach or put it together. And this Chassid had a little trick. As everyone was building their sukkahs every year, there would be a little bit of leftover wood, some leftover nails, and he would go around to everyone in the town and say, "Hey, can I have that piece of wood? Are you using these nails?" And everybody knew. And so they gave him a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and he would piece together a sukkah. It was just big enough to hold his family, and it was great. Once he had the sukkah, the party came, the joy came, the singing came, and the wealthy man was miserable. So he made an announcement in the factory. Anyone who gives the Karliner Chassid any part of their sukkah, whether it's a piece of wood, no matter how rotten it is, whether it's a nail, no matter how rusty it is, will be fired after Sukkot. And so it was now Erev Sukkot, the day leading into the holiday, and the wealthy man, who had this gigantic sukkah, the size of a football field, with these beautiful oak wood tables and candelabras, everything that you could ever imagine, running water, beautiful dishes, everything in his sukkah. He was looking across the street, and he saw there was no sukkah from the Karliner Chassid. And he said to himself, "Yes, I finally did it. I got rid of that Chassid's joy. He's not going to have a sukkah this year." And so he sits in his sukkah after the first night of davening, and he's leaning back in his chair thinking, it's so nice and quiet. Nobody's singing or joyous. We can all be miserable together. And what does he hear in the background? He hears the Chassid and his family, and they're making a bracha on the wine, and they're singing, and there's joy, and the rich man, he can't take it. So he runs out of his sukkah, and he runs across the street, and he says to the Karliner, "Tell me, where did you get the wood from this sukkah? Because whoever gave it to you, they're going to get it from me. They're going to be fired, and they'll never get a job in this town again." The Karliner Chassid, he looks up at the wealthy guy and says, "Shalom Aleichem, my friend. You finally came to join us. Come, sit down, let's say a l'chaim. Let's sing a little bit together." The wealthy man says, "I don't want to talk about singing or l'chaims. I want to know, where did you get this wood?" "Well, I'll be happy to tell you. Just come sit down. Let's talk about it." So the wealthy man, he comes in, and he sits on one of the broken chairs in the Chassid's sukkah. And the Karliner Chassid says to the wealthy man, "Let me tell you what happened. Every year I go around and I get scraps of wood and rusty nails from people. And I went over to Moishele and I said, 'Moishele, you have some wood for me?' And he said, 'I'm really sorry, but I don't have any wood left. We used everything.' And the Karliner Chassid said, 'Well, what about a couple of nails? Anything? Something that was bent or didn't work out?' He said, 'No, we don't have any leftovers. I went to Shleimele, I went to Shmirel, I went to everyone, and nobody had any leftovers for me. And I didn't understand what was going on here.' Finally, somebody said to me, 'Hey, you know what? We're not allowed to give you, because the wealthy man's going to fire us if we give you anything.' And I thought to myself, oh no, what am I going to do? It's now getting to be late in the afternoon, and I'm walking around town trying to figure out how am I going to build a sukkah. And who do I run into? The angel of death, Malach HaMavet. I see the angel of death, and I say, Angel of death, Shalom Aleichem. What are you doing in our humble town? And he said, I just have one more job to do before Sukkot starts. And I said to him, really? Who's going to die in our town? One more pickup? And he says, you wouldn't believe it. And the Karliner Chassid says to the wealthy man, you wouldn't believe who his last pickup was, staring right into his eyes. Angel of death said he was coming for you. And I told the angel of death, listen, brother, that guy, he's already dead. You don't even need to bother. He's so sad and depressed all the time. I think death would be better than his life. You don't need to bother him. The angel of death said, really, he's that sad? And I said, yeah, he's really that sad. Well, I guess if he's that sad and depressed, I don't really have to bother. Thanks for saving me the work. And now the angel of death was about to leave. And I said to him, hey, can you do me a favor? And the angel of death says, sure. I said, listen, I really need a sukkah for the holiday. Do you have any ideas of what I can do? And he said, well, you know what? I'm not scheduled to be back here until after Sukkot. So why don't you go to where the Chevra Kadisha has the wooden stakes, where they put Po Nitman, here lies somebody who died, and you can build your sukkah from that. So he said to the wealthy man, look around my sukkah here. And the wealthy man looks around and sees that all of the wooden planks in the sukkah have a Pei Nun, that's for Po Nitman, here lies, where they would put the name of the person who passed away. He said, so you see, since the angel of death said nobody's going to die, I was able to take this wood from the cemetery. And the wealthy man, it really shook him to his core. And he started crying. And he said to the Chassid, what am I supposed to do? I have this sadness in my heart. I'm always angry and upset. Tell me, I have everything, but I have no joy. And you, who really has nothing, you're happy all the time. Where do you get all this joy from? The Chassid said, if you want to be joyous, you have to come to my Rebbe, the Karliner Rebbe, and then you can learn what true simcha, what true joy is. And so the wealthy man went to Karlin with the Chassid, and even though he was always full of anger and sadness, over time he became one of the greatest Karliner Chassidim, and he had no problem connecting with the joy in his heart. You know, sometimes, my sweetest friends, we just need somebody to light a little spark inside of us. And for this wealthy man, who eventually became such a big Karliner Chassid, it was the little poor Karliner Chassid across the street who did it for him through his singing, through his dancing, and never giving up. Because even though nobody wanted to help him, by remaining an optimist and davening and having emunah, even the angel of death came to help this Chassid build his sukkah. Good yantiv, my sweetest friends, good yantiv.